Welcome to The B Word, a women's lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Katie Ploss. I'm a school psychologist, women's wellness coach, a doula, and the founder of BU, a women's wellness community. I created The B Word to share my stories, knowledge, and training to help you navigate the everyday challenges of being a woman. We discuss everything from navigating dating and relationships, parenting, building a career, to just finding what you're passionate about and figure out who you are meant to be. At The B Word, we aim to destigmatize mental health challenges, grow, heal, and empower you to be your most authentic self. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to The B Word. I am just, again, like I said last week, we're just plugging and chugging right along. I am being joined this week by a guest. So before I bring her in, I want to introduce Helen, who will be sharing on the podcast this week about her fight with her chronic illness and having to really fight and advocate for herself. Helen has a diagnosis of Hashimoto's, which is something that is really near and dear to me too, because I have really close family members that have this diagnosis as well. It's a hormonal disorder, a thyroid disorder. And Helen has dedicated her career to helping other people through this diagnosis and to help them get on the other side and learn how to advocate for themselves with their medical care providers. She has a step-by-step process called the H5 Halo method that I'm going to ask her about and learn about right alongside you. That is going to teach us about not only how to advocate for ourselves as women in a medical field right now that really doesn't empower us to advocate for ourselves, but also how to combine advocating for yourself and then also how to just incorporate some really simple dietary and lifestyle changes. Obviously, the H5 Halo method is specific to Hashimoto's, but I myself have been dealing with hormone issues with my PCOS diagnosis, and so many women I talk to, both young, middle-aged, and old, struggle with balancing their hormones and responding to the needs that our womanly bodies go through. So I'm really excited to have Helen here today for her to share about her story and her method. All right, without further ado, I'm going to bring Helen in. Hi, Helen. Thanks for joining us today at The B Word.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So excited to be doing this episode. I think it's a really important one. But I want to start by just introducing you to the listenership. So tell us about yourself and your background and what you do.
I currently live in the French Alps. I've been here for nearly 20 years now. I originally lived in the UK. I studied biomedical sciences at university. And it was during that my health started to take a little bit of a nosedive. I had, glandular fever. That's I think it's often referred to as like mono in the US.
Oh, yes. I just went through that myself last year, mono. It's not a joke. Very serious.
No, it's not funny at all.
No.
So I had that at university in my second year. I also coincided with me having a vaccine for working in the labs that I was going to be working in. I was very stressed. I had a lot going on, lots of exams, lots of burning the candle at the both ends. And my diet probably wasn't great.
Yeah.
And my health just took a bit of a dive. It started to come back and I just carried on as normal and ignored it basically. But I found that my work life, working in a big pharmaceutical company, being a laboratory supervisor, was quite stressful. There was a lot of pressure. And myself and my husband decided that my working hours and my working environment were really not helping my health. And that's when we decided to move out to the Alps. I've worked as a private chef out here and I'm now a nutritional therapist. And that's what I studied in order to get my own health back on track when I was struggling so much with all the autoimmune stuff that was going on, particularly the Hashimoto's.
So do you think that the mono triggered some of these things, or did you come to find, like, through your experience and your journey that your Hashimoto's and these thyroid issues were happening prior to that?
I would say I was prone, to probably chronic issues, health issues, autoimmune stuff. There is family history of that. But yeah, there are definite triggers. I would say mono or glandular fever is definitely one of those. Epstein-Barr virus is strongly related with the incidence of Hashimoto's. So they're not saying that's the cause, but it is a contributing factor, as is the leaky gut, and obviously things like the stress, the poor diet. Obviously, we're contributing towards that side of things as well. Loss of family members, loss of friends, like grief. Obviously, that increases your inflammation and increases that leaky gut, and that again has been shown to be something that precedes the development of autoimmune conditions.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a genetic factor, but there is, I would say 70% of it is triggers from lifestyle, from diet, from kind of infections, trauma, things like that, that all kind of start to add up little by little. And it's never usually one thing, it's usually an accumulation.
An accumulation of things. And I think that's so true for women's health. I really relate to a lot of what you're saying. Because I was saying I had mono last year that like kicked my butt, and I'm coming back from that over the last year. Also, my mom was recently diagnosed with Hashimoto's and has
Okay.
been struggling with her thyroid and figuring that out. And so I think it's really interesting that there is this really complex genetic, environmental mixture that's mixing together that is causing these symptoms. And it's so tricky to diagnose and even trickier to treat because there is so many factors that are playing into it. And I think whether we're talking about the specific illnesses and autoimmune issues that happen with you and with me and in my family too, I think women in general really struggle with these really complex diagnoses and the way that our hormones are interacting with our body. So tell me more about what you've learned about Hashimoto's and other autoimmune hormonal thyroid diseases and how that influences your work now.
It's funny you should mention that actually. While she was saying that your mum's just been diagnosed, I was about to say that hormones play a huge part in being one of those contributing factors, and the increase in diagnosis at pregnancy and that menopause and menopause increases.
Mhm.
The hormones obviously play a huge part. Your endocrine system works very closely together. So if one set of your hormones is not functioning as it should do, or is starting to fluctuate, so if your thyroid isn't functioning, it can knock onto your sex hormones, to your stress hormones, and vice versa, such as pregnancy and menopause. When those stress hormones are fluctuating, it can then trigger that imbalance with the other hormones, with the thyroid hormones. And it's one of the reasons why you see that increase in diagnosis.
So when you say
That
stress
particular
hormones, are
phase.
you talking about cortisol specifically?
Yeah. Cortisol. Yeah.
Because I've been reading
That is.
about this a little bit. Because in addition to me having mono, I also just got diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is also a hormonal disorder.
Yeah.
And I've been reading a lot about hormonal disorders in general and how cortisol and your increased cortisol levels can impact that. And I think it's really interesting when we talk about our health, right? And how we regulate our cortisol or our stress levels and how
Yeah.
how that plays a role in our diet, our exercise, our health, and then in turn, what they're saying, like what westernized medicine is telling people to do to monitor these things. And that's not a lot. I think what I'm learning as I get into my 30s and a lot of other women I know are struggling with these things and I'm struggling with these things is that it really can feel really isolating. So when you were going through this, what was that like for you? Did you feel like you had the support or where did you turn?
I did feel extremely isolated. It affected me hugely with the fatigue, was really debilitating. I had a lot of brain fog that
Mhm.
affected my speech. It affected my cognition. I slurred when I spoke, when I was tired. I couldn't get the words. I'd use the wrong words in the wrong places. And that probably knocked my confidence quite a lot. And I didn't socialize as much. I didn't have the energy to do it anyway. But then I was also feeling really quite vulnerable when I was in social situations with people I didn't know that well.
Mm.
I was very aware that I was very slow to speak. I was very slow to think. And I was conscious that people would pick up on that. And I suppose my close circle of family and friends noticed, but those who didn't know me so much didn't really notice that difference. But I certainly felt it. And I did find that I just stopped socializing.
Yeah.
Didn't really want to go out so much. And I'm very lucky. My husband has been absolutely amazing throughout my whole kind of journey with my chronic illness. He's been incredibly supportive. And I know that's not the case for a lot of people. It is something that tends to break relationships. You lose friendships, as well as family members not understanding the extent of the illness. And I think maybe potentially thinking you're a hypochondriac because obviously you're always complaining of symptoms, you're always at the
Yeah.
doctor's, and you either go from that extreme where you are complaining about it, or you shut up and stop complaining about it because you know you're getting that response, which then it isolates you even further. Yeah, it can be incredibly difficult to navigate on your own, and it can make you feel very different. I suppose I felt like a completely different person. I didn't recognize myself a lot of the time when I was really ill.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like this double-edged sword of if you're complaining all the time or you're seeing the doctor and you're trying to figure it out, but you're not getting any answers. It also can feel just so frustrating when it's like you feel like all you're doing is complaining and you're not getting a direction of where to go next. And I think too that
Yeah.
can really cause a lot of people going through that or navigating chronic illness to just feel like they want to give up and isolate and just be by themselves and manage their symptoms the best that they can. Can you
Yeah, completely.
can you educate us a little bit more on Hashimoto specifically and what this autoimmune disease is and how it works and all the different symptoms that go with it?
Okay, so Hashimoto's isn't actually a thyroid condition. It's an immune system dysfunction. So your immune system is actively attacking your thyroid, the tissue surrounding your thyroid. It creates antibodies against specific tissue in your thyroid. So when they're testing for your TPO antibodies, that is your thyroid peroxidase enzyme, that is found within your thyroid and helps to make your thyroid hormones. Your immune system is making antibodies against this. And whilst it's trying to remove this enzyme, it causes significant damage to the thyroid in the process.
Mm.
There is also thyroglobulin antibodies, which can be present with Hashimoto's. And again, thyroglobulin is needed to make your thyroid hormones. And whilst your immune system is busy creating antibodies and attacking that, it can again cause further damage to the thyroid. And this is what causes the hyperthyroidism. So the hyperthyroidism tends to be an end result of the Hashimoto's. Yet most people aren't tested for Hashimoto's, they're only tested for their thyroid function. Most of the people that come to me into my Facebook group don't even know if they've got it. And it was one of the first things I ask is, do you have hyperthyroidism or do you have Hashimoto's? Do you have both? They know they've got an underactive thyroid, but 9 times out of 10, they don't know they've got Hashimoto's.
Do you see
Uh,
that because the underactive thyroid is really not a side effect, but it's an impact of the Hashimoto's? Do you see that there's just a huge variance in symptoms that makes it harder for people to be diagnosed? Obviously, I know hyperthyroidism, there are a set of symptoms that go with that. But what I've
yeah.
heard from people with Hashimoto's is that sometimes their symptoms vary a little bit.
Oh, yeah, it's very individual. And I suppose it depends what else is going on internally as well. If you've got other autoimmune conditions that are playing into that as well. But some of the main symptoms would be the chronic fatigue, would be the weight gain, although that for me wasn't a huge issue. And I think it was probably one of the reasons that my thyroid was not tested and was overlooked is because I didn't really put the weight on. So it was like, you don't fit the typical picture. You don't look
Right.
overweight. So it
Right.
can't be a thyroid issue. I had abnormal results. And then they didn't test me for another 8 years after that. And
Wow.
all that time I was pretty sick and getting worse and worse. And also facing that pushback from the doctors of you're stressed, you're anxious, you're depressed, there's nothing wrong with you. And I probably was stressed or anxious and depressed because there was something wrong with me and I wasn't being listened to.
Yeah.
They were looking at my test results and they weren't testing a full panel of tests. They were testing just the TSH. And so that looks fine.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons behind the not testing of the Hashimoto's antibodies is because they don't treat that side of things. They treat the hyperthyroidism, which is the end result. So I would say the Western medical system, it doesn't really matter to them if you have Hashimoto's or not, because the end result is hyperthyroidism. They're going to give you the medication to replace the thyroid hormone you should be producing. But until you get to that phase, nothing is done. And you can be quite symptomatic until you get to that phase and have a lot of different symptoms. The symptoms can be systematic and not just related to your thyroid because of the inflammation that constant immune activation causes.
Yeah.
But your immune system shouldn't be on that all the time and focusing on one area. It should be adaptive. And when it's not, it can cause a lot of inflammation. So I think some of the big things for me, obviously with the chronic fatigue, the brain fog, hair loss was another one. Kind of my memory was horrendous. The chronic pain, the joint pain I felt like I was about 80. Trying to get up and down the stairs, trying to get out of the chair. I would often have to be helped out of the chair. There were mornings where my husband had to help me get out of bed because I couldn't get myself out of bed because I was in so much pain. The weakness, the muscle weakness, that was another big one. Things like washing my hair. would absolutely wipe me out, and I would have to get out of the shower and lie down after I'd showered before I did anything
Yes, that
else
that
because I was
happened to
just
my
so
mom
wiped out.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm,
So there is a huge wide range in like array of symptoms. Digestive symptoms are very common.
mhm.
So bloating, kind of gas, reflux, cramping, all that kind of thing. Constipation, diarrhea, fluctuations between the two, very common.
And it's such a complex set of symptoms that really you could attribute to so many other things. Like my mom has this diagnosis, and I we think that hers was triggered by a really rough bout of COVID. So it's interesting too. It
Yeah.
came on similarly to how yours did, and the symptoms that she had didn't really make sense. And she also didn't have the weight gain either, and her TSH levels were normal for the longest time. And
Yeah.
so she was like, they were like, "Oh, this is long COVID. Like, you just have long COVID and you're depressed because you have long COVID and on and so on and so forth." And she's still at a point of trying to figure this out. How do you manage your symptoms now? Like, how many years ago was this when you were diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed in 2012, so
So
12
it's been
years
over
ago now.
10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did, like, yeah, like where you're a decade out of this diagnosis. So where are you at now with managing your symptoms?
I would say up until what would it be 2016, I didn't manage my symptoms. I took the medication. I went backwards and forwards to specialists and doctors and was told that, like you said, there's nothing wrong with me and the medication was working. My TSH looked fine, but I felt absolutely dreadful.
Mm,
2016, as I turned 40, a friend brought me a nutritional therapy session for my 40th birthday, and that changing my diet, I saw massive improvements, and I couldn't believe how much just changing my diet made a difference. The insomnia that I'd had for 20 years stopped within
wow.
3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. That was the first thing I noticed. The digestive symptoms, again, probably within 4 to 6 weeks. I'd had years and years of those. I'd previously been diagnosed celiac and I'd been having digestive symptoms continually for years. They went completely within those first 6 weeks.
What
My
were you
energy
changing? Were you following a meal plan, or what did you change in your diet?
So I followed the autoimmune paleo protocol.
Okay.
It's pretty restrictive, and it's not the first point that I would start with clients because it is so restrictive. It
Mhm.
takes a lot of nutrients dense foods out of the diet. But I was in a real bad state, and I think the nutritional therapist I worked with at that point was like, let's just try and reset,
Makes
which I
sense.
think for me probably was the right decision because I was at that level where, yeah, it just needed to be quite drastic, I think.
Yeah.
But it was removing, so I was already off the gluten because I was celiac, but it removed kind of any of your refined grains, any processed foods, any sugars. It removed nightshades, nuts, seeds, so legumes, so your beans and pulses, anything that might cause that inflammation or contribute to it. But then the idea is you reset and then you start reintroducing. And I struggled with that phase. And I probably struggled with that phase for a couple of years because my nutritional therapist retired.
Mm.
So I was navigating it on my own. And it's probably one of the reasons I don't use it as a first port of call because it's very easy if you're doing it on your own to get stuck in that restriction phase. And there's nowhere near enough nutrition for what you need in that phase.
So was it like have you heard of Whole30? It sounds similar to Whole30.
Yeah, so it's whole foods basically. So yeah, it was meat, vegetables, fish, and then you start basically reintroducing the the
Yeah,
different
so that's
things that
essentially
the
what the
least
Whole30 diet
inflammatory
is.
first.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
paleo, it, like,
yeah,
reintroduces the
yeah.
food back in. So when you were stuck in the restrictive phase, were you stuck in, like, you just continued to do that? Or were you, like, you would introduce something, you'd have a flare up, and then you'd go back?
Yeah, exactly. I would introduce
Okay.
something, have a flare up, and then think, okay, take that back out. I can't have that. I react to that. And to a lot of those foods, I now eat and I don't react to. I didn't do the gut
Interesting.
healing in between, which was what was missing. So I took
Okay.
the foods out. I didn't focus on healing my gut, and then I reintroduced. And this is what a lot of people do. They take the foods out, they try and reintroduce, and it doesn't work. And their
Mm,
diet just gets more and more restrictive.
yeah.
You have to actively start healing the gut and looking at if it's been going on for years, that's a lot of damage. That's a lot of inflammation that you need to address and add in foods that are going to be beneficial for that and maybe supplements initially to help with that. Something that's chronically low with hyperthyroidism is stomach acid levels tends to be chronically low, which means you're not you're not breaking your food down, you're not extracting your nutrients, you're not releasing your digestive juices. So it's called the food's passing on in a state it shouldn't be. It causes a huge amount of inflammation, causes that leaky gut.
Wow.
So
Okay. So then you were taking specific supplements. Was this something that you were researching on your own, or was like a holistic doctor recommending, or how were you figuring it out?
it was research on my own. And I would say so that was 2016, I started making the changes. And in 2019, I signed up to study nutrition and health coaching because I was like, I've got this far and I have seen these improvements, but I've still got these other symptoms. And I think I can get rid of them if I know what I'm doing. And rather than pay to work with a nutritional therapist, I decided, you know what, I'm going to study it myself. I've got that science background. I'm quite
Mhm.
curious. So I did a year's studying for that. And I turned my health around in probably the first 3 months of that course
Wow.
completely. Those
Wow.
symptoms that I'd had for years, I no longer had. I didn't have the fatigue. I didn't have to manage my energy levels. I didn't have to look at my diary and think, okay, what can I manage and what can't I manage? I was just able to do what I wanted to do, including socializing, including getting back out, exercising, skiing, all those kind of things.
Wow.
And that's when I decided to carry on and do the nutritional therapy for another 3 years so that I could then work as a nutritional therapist and help others. Because I was just like, this help's not readily available. I couldn't find it when I was looking for it. And
Yeah.
if it can make that much of a difference, it really pushed me to want to continue that studying so that I could get the word out there that there is another way. You don't just have to struggle and take medication and put up with the symptoms that go with it.
And so many people are just struggling through their symptoms and they think this is like my lot in life. And it's to treat a very complex problem, that's a really complex solution that we have to
Yeah.
apply. So tell me about this. You have this H5 Halo method that
Yeah.
you use. Tell me about how that was developed and what that is.
Okay, so basically, I look at 5 different areas. And the reason I've done it in that halo, that cyclical system, is you can't address one without the other. And I would say that was a mistake I made. I looked at my diet and did not look at anything else.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the reasons that I couldn't get that full recovery and get rid of those symptoms was because I was only focusing on one area. So yes, diet is key. It is a major area. But you've also got to look at your lifestyle. So 3 of the other areas that come into that halo method are your sleep. If you're not sleeping as you should be, getting the quality or the quantity, you can't process your toxins and remove them, which is predominantly when most of it's done during your sleep. You can't repair and regenerate your tissues, which you need to do if you've had that chronic inflammatory process, those gut issues going on. You need to replace those tissues that are worn out and not functioning as they should be. That sleep also impacts your gut microbiome directly, and your gut microbiome dictates your immune health. So if that's not healthy, then if you're not getting good sleep, your gut health's not healthy, you're going to eat more, you're going to have more cravings, you're going to be eating the wrong foods, it's going to impact your mood. So we look at the sleep really quite heavily. Stress is another major one. If you are stressed, you don't digest your food properly because you don't basically release the digestive juices that you need, which can cause, again, a lot of inflammation. It causes that leaky gut, which causes that autoimmune response in the end. So stress is a big one, and it can have a wide range in impact, a wide range of symptoms as well. Like you're talking about with that cortisol,
Mhm.
what you eat can increase your cortisol if you're not eating the right foods, if you're eating them in the wrong combination, but obviously that stress does as well.
Yeah.
So it's a really important area. Then I look at exercise as well. You need to balance your exercise. I work with either usually 2 camps of people. They're either not exercising because they physically can't, because they're too chronically fatigued to even think about it. They're in too much pain. They
Mm.
just can't. And I fell in that camp. I couldn't do it. If I exercised, it made me worse. Within, I would say, even just a short dog walk of 10 minutes, I would come in and need to sleep for 2, 3 hours.
Oh, yeah.
So I just couldn't do it. And then the other camp is those who can do it, but are doing it to excess because they're wanting to maybe lose that weight.
Mm.
But what they're not realizing is that either end of that scale elevates the cortisol and increases your inflammation. So you need to find that sweet spot in the middle of that exercise of kind of what's going to help you without causing further inflammation. So that's the kind of 4 areas that I look at. The 5th is looking at testing and supplementation.
Mm.
So that's the kind of 5th kind of cog in that halo that you'll see.
Yeah. It's funny I'm doing this, like, in my own I was thinking about this as I'm going through my PCOS journey. I'm like, I'm going through and addressing these things, but I love how you've organized it in, like, this
Yeah.
really visually pleasing way and also incorporating all of the areas. So tell me about the supplementation. Is this, like, daily supplements, or what does that look like?
Yeah, and that'll be very individual for each person.
Okay.
It depends what's underpinning the problem. So when I work with a client, I will start by looking at their diet. They'll also be asked to complete a huge questionnaire, and it can seem like a bit of a ball ache to complete, but it gives me so much information of which systems are the problem underneath it all. Because you may be displaying these symptoms, but it may not be that system that is a problem. It may be 2 or 3 systems further back that's causing those issues.
Yes.
So then we look at what supplementation does that particular client need. So what are they lacking? Is it digestive enzymes that they don't have enough of? Do they not have the stomach acid that they need? Do they need supplements that are going to help heal the gut line and stop the leaky gut? Do they need supplements that are going to help make the thyroid hormones such as iodine, selenium, zinc, or convert them? And then also looking at targeted testing as well when it comes to supplements. Some supplements are perfectly fine to take without testing. Others can accumulate and be stored in your system and can create toxicity if they get too high. So certain things need to be tested for as standard. Things like the selenium, the zinc, the iodine, they need to be tested for. You shouldn't really be taking them if you don't need them. And that's where
tested through blood work?
Yep. Some of it will be through blood work, through the GP, through the doctor. Some of it will be specialized testing, so functional testing, basically. I quite commonly use a full stool analysis, which shows inflammatory markers. It shows which bacteria are out of balance, if there's yeast overgrowth, if there's parasites. So that would be something I quite commonly use. Hormone panels would be something that I would use. And both of these, doing them through specialized labs, are way more detailed than anything you'll get through your doctor. Because we're looking on a functional level. We're not looking for disease. We're looking for what's out of balance and what's contributing to the issues, which I think is the difference it's why the two work together, the medicine and the nutritional therapy.
Yeah.
The therapy can support the medicine. Yes, you need the medication, but what else can you do with your diet, your lifestyle, your supplements to support that? So you get that quality of life back, not just the I would say I felt when I was on medication that it kept me alive, but I didn't feel like I had any quality of life. And that's the difference, I think, with the nutritional therapy, is giving me that quality of life.
And I think, too, what you were saying is the doctors don't necessarily care if you have Hashimoto's or not. It's just if you end up having hyperthyroidism, they'll medicate that. And that's really what Western medicine does, is they treat the disease. And you are looking at treating the function of how you function in your body and in your life. And that is really what wellness looks like and is looking at all of these components together. And it is complex and it is hard. And I'm sure that you would have to answer a very long questionnaire. And for me, going through my PCOS and journey and learning about what that even is and how to treat it, is that I, like you, have had to do so much of my own research that has gone on for years. And I've hit so many dead ends of this worked, this didn't work, more dead ends than things that worked. But it does really come down to all of these areas are very important. And I think also, I don't know if this was the trend of the last 10, 15 years. And I see the field moving, medical field and functional medicine moving away from that. It's all diet. But there was a long time, and I started this journey, I want to say, probably around the time that you were diagnosed, 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
And it was 80, I remember the stat I got, 80% of what you eat, and it's 20% of everything else. And I was like, okay, so you're saying that my exercise doesn't matter, my sleep doesn't matter, my stress doesn't matter, my overall health doesn't matter. All that matters is really what I eat. And not only is that false, but it created such a sense of shame when it didn't work. When these things didn't work and you're hitting a dead end over and over, I must be doing something wrong. And it created such a sense of discouragement, and so many people, I think, eventually just give up. I'm not doing this. And there's people like you and I that are very passionate about wellness. But for some people, it's they don't have the bandwidth for whatever reason to pursue years and years of studying. And my journey of studying wellness went toward the psychology route and more of mental health. But I had similar reasons for doing that, is that I was really looking to heal myself. Yeah. And I just think that it's so common for people to really blame themselves for struggling with these things when it's so much more complex than that. And I love that your method really addresses that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much research now that goes into showing that the impact that stress has, like physically on you, the kind of the impact that poor sleep has, and obviously, like say, the over exercising, the under exercising, the impact those things have, and they can have a huge impact. Yes, you can't out exercise a poor diet, but
No,
yeah,
for
diet
sure.
is not. Yeah, but diet
Yeah.
is not the be all and end all. It is part of the picture, but it is not the picture. It's not
Right.
the entirety of it.
And I think for so long, that's what we were told. And that like the diet culture and all of that is if you restrict, you were also talking about like being super restrictive. And sometimes, like for you, that was necessary, right? To reset your body and
Yeah,
to figure it out. And you really shouldn't be that restrictive unless you are under the supervision of a licensed professional because
yeah.
you very easily can do that completely wrong. And there are so many other things to address and look at. And so when people work with you, like they go through this questionnaire, what happens then? Obviously you sit with them and you go through the results and how these different systems are impacting their body and their wellness. But then what? Do they have a plan for each of these areas or what does it look like?
So initially, I'll ask them to do the food diary. I'll ask them to do the questionnaire. I'll get the data back from that. And then the first session will be a 2-hour session. And it will be digging even further into the information that they've given me. So finding out even more of kind of the intricacies of what's going on. The second 2-hour session that they have, first part of that is I will usually present a kind of mind map of what is going on and their possible nutrient deficiencies, their possible triggers from diet and from lifestyle, and then look at the systems that are involved according to the symptoms that they've basically reported to me, so that they can then see how those systems are interacting with each other and how they're causing kind of those symptoms that they're experiencing. And usually have the goals of what they're wanting to achieve in the middle of that, so we can bring it back to what they want to do. The second part of the session is basically I will present what we're going to do first. Obviously, you can't do the whole plan in one go. It'd be far too overwhelming and
Yeah, of
daunting to try and fix everything at once. So I'll
course.
then zone in on which things are the most problematic and which things we need to focus on first. And then the following sessions that they have are usually 60 minutes, follow-up sessions. And those sessions are looking at what's worked, what hasn't worked, what they've implemented, what they haven't been able to implement. Can we work around things if there's a particularly problematic areas? Which symptoms have resolved, if there's any new symptoms. So basically just checking in and then progressing with that plan that we initially put in place.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, it's very comprehensive. And how many do people see you for a certain amount of sessions? Is it ongoing, or do you usually set them out into the wild after they've
I,
learned?
I have a 6-month Hashimoto's healing program that I have, and I call it the Hashimoto's healing program, but it works with hyperthyroidism, Hashimoto's, whichever it is. It tends to be the same things underpinning all of it. It's usually a 6-month program. There are 3 different levels within that program that they can choose. There's a basic level, a premium, and a VIP. The VIP tends to be the most popular. It's the most comprehensive. It has the nutritional therapy sessions, as I've mentioned. So you get 4 follow-ups. You get the 2-hour initial sessions. You also get 4 coaching sessions of 30 minutes that are interspersed between your nutritional therapy sessions that basically they're designed for kind of motivation, for accountability, like the small things that need tweaking and adjusting rather than plan overhaul. So it's a check-in to keep everybody on track and keep going. I found leaving 4 to 6 weeks between sessions that some people, if they got stuck, they just stopped. So I put those coaching sessions in to keep that process going. They have email support throughout. So if they've got a question, they don't have to wait to the next session. They can, and again, that's something that I learned, that if they do have to wait to that next session, quite often they've stopped doing what you asked them to do because they didn't know if what they were doing was right or if this symptom that
Right.
had cropped up was normal, and they just stopped. Yeah. I've tweaked it as I've gone along, as I've practiced, but that's
Yeah.
the top level.
Awesome. And then you said there's a Facebook group as well. So is this for people that are just in the program or is it people wanting to learn more? How does that community aspect play into it?
That's for anybody with a thyroid condition that wants to learn more, whether you've got underactive thyroid, which is hyperthyroidism, whether it is hyperactive. I was hyperactive when I was actually diagnosed, because Hashimoto's can make you switch between the two initially. Or Hashimoto, it doesn't matter what the kind of diagnosis is. If you've got a thyroid condition and you are looking to get back on top of your health with your diet and lifestyle, then yeah, the group's for anybody that's looking to do that.
Awesome. So I will link that in the show notes for anyone that's listening to this that thinks that they just want to start to learn more. And then I will also link your website as well, how to work with you. Is that the only way that people can work with you and being in the program, or what else do you offer?
I have a couple of freebies that kind of introductory for people who are joining the group or people who want it. One of them is for 5 simple steps to banish Hashimoto's brain fog. And again, their diet and lifestyle changes. I have essential thyroid testing checklist, which again walks people through what tests they need to be asking for, what their results should look like. So most people are not aware of that. I was the same. I wasn't aware of what I should have been asking for, and a lot of it was missed. So they're free. I also have a recipe ebook, which is €17. So similar in dollars. It wouldn't be too much different. There may be a couple of dollars different. And I also run twice a year my 8-week Hashimoto's and hyperthyroid weight loss program.
Awesome. So there's plenty of freebies and comprehensive paid experiences if you're really wanting to dive in. But I think this is such important work you're doing. And I really just wanted to support you to get the word out there, because I think that this is so niche and so many people have this, but it is somewhat niche as far as expertise in it. And a lot of people don't have this really comprehensive background. And through your experience, you've really been taking the time to become this expert in it by using data and science and really working with people on an individual level. I'm sure that there's on your the testimonials I'm sure are incredible, because you're really doing that individual work and really looking at the whole person. So kudos to you. I love hearing about women doing the work of supporting other women and women's health and teaching them how to advocate for themselves and their needs. But thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed our chat.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. That's all for this episode of The B Word. Don't forget to check out the show notes for any resources we shared with you today, as well as finding our links to our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel, and our website, bucommunity.com. You can find out all of our course offerings, memberships, opportunities to work with me individually, and more. That's all for now. See you next time.